Hey everyone, if you are tuning in, I want to welcome you to Dr. Tara Tuesdays. Today is Tuesday, March the 24th, 2020, and we are going to be engaging in an important conversation on how we support ourselves through transition. Hey, if you're just tuning in, it's Dr. Tara. Thank you for joining me this evening on Dr. Tara Tuesdays. Hey, Nikki, it's always good to see you. We're going to be talking about a topic that we have to talk about, change and transition. And I'm going to jump right into it because I feel like this is such an important conversation. We have been bombarded with news over the past few weeks around the coronavirus. And more importantly, we've been bombarded with change. And so one of the things that I want to just start the conversation off with is saying that, issues like this expose one, our humanity, but also our vulnerability. And everyone is experiencing change and reacting to it on some level, whether it's immediate reactions, whether it's delayed reactions, whether it's going to be postponed reactions. We are all experiencing change. And one of the things that I want to just say, just pretty much straightforward, is that it's normal to have anxiety and fear to abnormal events. One of the things that I've been seeing in social media is, how do we adjust to this new normal? And one of my responses to that is that we first acknowledge that this is abnormal, right? And so before we can even start to make new schedules and new routines, we have to acknowledge that what we are experiencing is abnormal. And so many of us are having normal responses to an abnormal reaction. I think that's important for us to acknowledge because it gives us permission to feel scared. It gives us permission to feel uncertain. It gives us permission to feel frightened. It gives us permission to experience all of these things in a way that allow us then to decide, okay, well, what am I now going to do with this? And so as we have this conversation this evening, one of the things I'm going to walk us through tonight are the stages of change and also the stages of grief and loss, because whenever there's a change, there's also a loss. So I've been seeing a couple other posts on social media asking people, what do you miss most about your life 2 to 3 weeks ago? And so acknowledging that with this change comes a loss, and how do we support ourselves through this transition? And so when we talk about supporting ourselves through transition, especially transitions that are sudden, we literally are waiting every day for new updates from local, state, federal authorities around, okay, what's going to happen? And some of us, well, I feel like I'm receiving mixed messages. This person is saying this person is saying this, this health professional is saying this one is saying that. And so how do I decide what pieces of information I'm going to take and make applicable to my life and to the life of my family? And which pieces of information can I allow just to sit almost like in my parking lot? Am I going to keep it for data and use it when I need it? And so when we think about change, there are 5 stages of change that I want to walk us through as it relates to this. And as always, I look forward to hearing your comments. I look forward to, reading your comments and to having a discussion, because if one of the stages that is mentioned, you find a connection with, I want you to bring that into our conversation tonight and bring that into the Dr. Tara community tonight so that we can process it together. So when we look at the stages of change, the first stage of change is a stage called pre-contemplation, which is just denial, right? So for many of us, when we heard about, things being shut down, or we heard about the seriousness of the coronavirus, many of us were in pre-contemplation denial, right? I didn't think, and so let me back up. Stages of change is about behavior. So behaviors I'm going to have to either stop doing, modify, or start doing. And so when we talk about pre-contemplation, which is denial, many of us were in denial. Some of us are still in denial that I have to change my behavior. I still feel like I can move freely. I still feel like, the limitations or the quarantine are excessive, or they don't apply to me or my family. And so understanding what that means for us. What behaviors have I had to stop? Have I had to modify, or have I had to start doing? And where am I at with that? Am I in denial? Some of us, when we are faced with sudden change, and we have to acknowledge how our bodies respond to change. Some of us, I like to face that change head on. Some of us, and this is me talking to myself, some of us, I'm not a big process person. I want to get to the outcome, right? I'm already in June and July in my mind. Like, okay, well, when is this going to be over? I'm not looking forward to all these behavioral modifications that I necessarily have to make. And so what am I in denial about around this transition, and how can I support myself through that? Contemplation. So we did pre-contemplation. Contemplation is, you know what? This is starting to make sense, and I'm going to do something about it a little bit later. So maybe in my mind, I'm prepping, what things do I need? What are essential items to have? Or how do I, make sure that my children are good? Or, you know what? We're going to start thinking about this a little bit later. So I haven't really started to make any serious behavioral changes, but I am thinking about it. I'm acknowledging that this is an issue, and I'm going to do something about it later. Preparation is I've begun to make small changes, and I'm beginning to see small results. So, you know what, maybe that first weekend I still went out, maybe I was still doing things, or maybe I was still handling business as usual. But I'm seeing now that I have to make small changes in order to get some small results. And so when we think about transition, one of the things that I want to give as a piece of feedback, especially for those of us where, and really this is all of us, where this transition happens suddenly, this change happens suddenly. Suddenly, the best way to support ourselves and our loved ones through change in order to make changed behaviors kind of stick and sustain is through small incremental steps. And so some of you may have heard me talk about this before, when we start to make, and I always go with weight loss and nutrition, we start those, hard, fast change. I want to exercise 3 times a day, 6 days a week, that usually lasts 2 to 3 days. We usually go back to our old behaviors. And similarly, some of us, we started last week hard. I'm going to put myself on a schedule. I'm going to put my kids on a schedule. I'm going to put my mother on a schedule. I'm going to put my spouse on a schedule. And we overexhaust ourselves. And I don't know, give me a thumbs up if that was your reality. That was my reality. I joke with a few friends that I quit homeschool. Learning is going to start again in 2021. I'm joking, but that's how I felt, because, and so understanding that when we talk about supporting ourselves through change, when we talk about preparation, how am I preparing myself to sustain this change should it continue? What things am I going to bring in that are doable? One of the things that I'm always big on when we talk about transition, supporting ourselves and our loved ones through transition, is where's the easiest place for us to start? Where's the easiest area for me to begin? Who is the easiest person in my household? Let me start with them and get them on my side before we move to everyone else. And so understanding all of that too, and how that works to support us through that process. Action. So we've done pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation. Now we're on action. So action, what it looks like is I'm beginning to change my environment. And really for us, what that means is I'm staying home. I'm bringing in pieces of my old routine and merging them into my new routine. So it's creating an environment that still allows me to feel safe. When we talk about supporting ourselves through transition, the thing that we always want to ensure is our physical and emotional safety. And one of the things that I would be remiss to mention is that situations such as this literally create unsafe emotions, right? I feel unsafe. I feel scared about what's happening to me, whether it's health-wise. I feel scared to go outside. I feel scared financially about what's happening about my job, or if I'm an entrepreneur, my business. And so acknowledging those feelings. And so action is I'm creating an environment that works to help me feel safe. One of the things that we talked about last week, as we talked about anxiety, is setting boundaries with ourselves. And so for me, with my environment, is limiting my exposure to the news. Who are the most trusted news outlets that I have? How do I, kind of quarantine or not quarantine myself against the news? How do I ration out the information that I'm receiving in a way that allows me to maintain my emotional well-being, my mental health, my peace, and my and the space that I need in order to process? One of the things that often happens as we're receiving information, it becomes information overload. So as I read one article, I'm immediately going to the follow-up articles that they have posted. Or as I look at one video, I'm immediately going to another video. So I'm not even giving my brain and my body a chance to process. And so what happens is that I tend to work myself up, and I get overloaded and overworked. And by the time I finish, I'm just exhausted. And then the last piece of change is maintenance. So how am I going to maintain these things for a period of time? And so one of the things that as it relates to what we're experiencing now as a people, as a worldwide society, is that we don't know how long this is going to last. And so what pieces of my behavior can I begin to implement that will allow me to sustain this change for however long I need to do that, that works to maintain my physical and emotional peace. Now, with stages of change, so we did pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, and maintenance. Change involves a loss. And when we think about change, a lot of times we don't think about what we're giving up. And part of the process with this, as it relates to supporting ourselves through transition, is allowing ourselves to effectively process what we've lost. And Nikki, you said it so eloquently. It was overwhelming last week. Definitely had to find balance on what I watched and read. And I agree, I'm giving you a thumbs up, because it's so easy to go down this rabbit hole and not even be aware of it, not even notice it until you've gotten too far, until you can't sleep, until you're frustrated with everybody or everything. And so as we talk about supporting ourselves through change, then acknowledging too that I'm giving up something for every behavior that I'm starting to implement, whether it's a modification, whether it's a start, I am stopping something. And every time we stop something, there's a loss, even if that stopping something is for our own betterment. And so as we go through the stages of grief and loss, the first stage is denial, right? I'm in denial that I had to give up anything, right? So, for those of us who are parents, I'm in denial that I had to give up my normal routine. I'm in denial that, I couldn't get my kids up and out and they're not going to have a response. I'm in denial that I had to buy more groceries. One of the things that, I'm saying is how much children are eating, and I'm, just acknowledging that there is a loss. I'm in a loss of the weekly amount of food that I was going to have in my house, because I have a 15-year-old son who goes right through it. And so whatever it is, I'm in denial about that loss, allowing ourselves to experience that. Anger, that's something that where a lot of people are at this week, I'm noticing. Give me a thumbs up if you're feeling that way, or if you've seen that too. So anger at who? I'm angry at myself. I'm angry at others. I'm angry at the situation. I'm angry at the universe. So many of us are just experiencing anger. And when we look at anger from an emotional standpoint, anger is what we usually call a secondary emotion, meaning that there is an underlying emotion that precedes it. A lot of times it's either fear. So I'm scared about something and it turns into anger, sadness, or a loss. And so allowing myself to identify what that anger, who or what that anger is towards, and allow it to be okay. Anger is an emotion that is okay. A lot of times we feel like I shouldn't be angry, or I don't know how to process it. Anger is an action emotion. We can get a lot of behaviors to occur through anger, right? So I'm angry enough, so I'm going to make sure I'm taking precautions. I'm angry enough, so I'm going to make sure that I'm mindful of my behaviors. I'm mindful of my brain-body connection. Bargaining, we often hear that too. So that's that if-then, right? So bargaining, one of the things that I'm noticing is in order to make this make sense for a lot of people, it only makes sense if I know someone who's been personally affected. Right. And that's just typical. That's just typical human response. Right. Because a lot of us are in between that denial and bargaining stage, like, is this really happening? Or it's only happening if. Right. So when I find out someone I know has it, then I'll believe that it's serious. Or when this happened, this will happen. And one of the things that we want to be mindful of is that we're not caught up in that, because it places us in that denial period a little bit longer than we necessarily have to be. Depression is shoulds. I'm thinking about, where I was 2 or 3 weeks ago. I'm thinking about what should have happened, what I could have done, what I didn't do. And that's also very, very dangerous. So one of the things that I've always talked about is anxiety thinking. Anxiety thinking is that futuristic thinking. Depression thinking is that past tense thinking. They work together. It becomes a cycle. So because I didn't do this last month, I'm not going to be able to do this next month, right? And so it keeps us in this cycle. Or because I didn't help my child with their homework, because I missed that parent-teacher conference in September, I'm not going to know what's going on today. And so one of the things that either one of those thought patterns, whether I'm in a depressive thought pattern or an anxious thought pattern, one of the things that it does is that it keeps us out of the present moment, and it doesn't allow us to move from a present mindset. And when I'm stuck between that depressive or anxious thinking, I'm not able to kind of get any traction towards what I want to accomplish. I'm stuck in that space. And then the last stage of grief and loss, is acceptance. And so within this role that I've lost, and one of the things that I have also seen is that this this mandated moment of stillness has caused us to really acknowledge who we are versus what we do, right? So many of us have built our identities around being doers, right? So this is my title, this is what I do, this is who I am. And with this situation, it's allowing me to just be. It's allowing me to sit with myself. It's allowing me to sit with family members. It's allowing me to sit with friends and families that I don't usually connect with, and figure out what it is that I need in this moment. How do I see myself outside of what's going on? How am I identifying myself? And how is that identification helping to get me through this process, right? It's not about what I do, because a lot of us, I'm not doing much of anything. Even if I'm continuing to work, I'm still sitting in a place of having to be still. And when we think about our society is one that encourages that doing almost to the point of becoming a martyr. And this is forcing us all to take for some of us, a necessary pause, for some of us, an uncomfortable pause. And so as we talk about supporting ourselves through this transition, one of the things that I want to make mention of is, how do we support ourselves through these different stages of change? And how do we support ourselves through these different stages of grief and loss? And one of the things that we posted last week was our self-talk flyer, because it starts with self-talk. How am I going to get myself from denial to acceptance, right? How am I going to get myself from denial to or pre-contemplation to preparation, where I'm starting to make small changes and I'm starting to acknowledge different behaviors that I can do? How do I give myself permission to be sad, right? To be angry, because anger is a part of this process, to be frustrated, to be fearful. And how do I walk with myself and guide myself from a compassionate standpoint, from a present moment standpoint? I'm not stuck between that depressive state of what I didn't do, or what should have happened, or what this person should have done, or what this official should have done. Because the reality of it is that we are all here now. And it's only from the present moment can we actually make effective change that's going to sustain us in more weeks where we're not certain of what's going to come. And so the self-talk piece is so important. We started to touch on it last week, but I wanted to spend some more time on it this week because it really is important. And so as we think about the coronavirus, as we think about the fear that comes with that, and again, that fear is natural because we're having a natural reaction to an abnormal event. One of the things that I would challenge us to do is to be honest about what and we call them limiting beliefs are, right? What is my mindset around this? And to write it down, right? If I'm noticing that I'm reading an article and it automatically has my mind go left around something about me in parenting, something about me in my employment, something about me and my health, what is that limiting belief? And literally write the opposite of it. How can I change that limiting belief to an affirming belief that places me in the present moment? And so what is my self-talk? What routines can I continue to do? Boundaries are so important during this time with myself and with others. How am I setting boundaries for myself? How am I setting boundaries with others? How am I limiting my conversations with people that may not be as helpful, even if the intention is helpful, but the outcome is one that gives me anxiety, is one that makes it hard for me to sleep. And so understanding that those boundaries are essential. What am I allowing myself to do? Am I allowing myself to have a day of rest? Or am I noticing that, when I lay around, that's when those depressive or anxious thoughts are coming? What do I need in this moment? One of the things that situations like this, these situations of forced stillness allow us to do is acknowledge the need for us to engage in proper self-care and to acknowledge what that looks like for us, right? So some of us, we have to be moving. That means that I'm going to set the boundary where I'm physically moving within my house. If I feel comfortable walking around my neighborhood, of course, practicing social distance or acceptable social distance or spacing. How am I doing that in a way that allows me to still feel connected to the outdoors, still feel connected to my body? If I'm a person that needs to physically rest, how am I allowing myself to do that through this stage of transition? And then the last piece is, who is my village? Now, this is critical because, again, one of the things that we often think about with change is, we tend to focus on people that we tend to say, are in quote unquote vulnerable positions. This is a vulnerable population, especially around coronavirus. One of the things that I want to say is that we are all vulnerable, right? We are all vulnerable because we're all experiencing this in real time. So whether it's, even if it's not from a health standpoint, but if it's from a financial standpoint, or if it's from a family standpoint, because I'm in a household where the people I love are triggering me, right? We are all vulnerable, and we all have the opportunity to accept our vulnerability. And so when it comes to understanding who our village is, how am I identifying myself in this moment, right? How am I identifying myself in this moment? And how can I create a village of people, or with people who also identify themselves as the same thing? So if I'm a parent, how am I seeking out other parents who are dealing with these issues, and how are they getting through it, right? How are they being honest with themselves about, Monday we had a great day. Tuesday, we didn't do anything, right? I told my kids, you get a half an hour of screen time, and that was the first 30 minutes, and I've been giving them screen time all day since then. How do I find people that are allowing themselves to have honest reactions to this situation? Whether I'm a student, one of the things that I've been seeing going around is acknowledging seniors, whether it's college, graduate school, high school, elementary school, middle school, and that fear that, I may not have a graduation. If I'm a student, how am I finding other students who are going through this? What are they doing that I can pull from? If I'm a business owner, small business owner, if I'm an entrepreneur, how are other business owners getting through this? Community-wise, if I'm looking for Baltimore City, Baltimore County, Maryland, surrounding states, what are we doing to band together in order to acknowledge that we are all vulnerable? We are all in a vulnerable position. And with that vulnerability, we are then able to bring our full selves, which means that I'm not only able to bring my vulnerability, but I'm also able to bring my strengths into this position, or into this space, to see, okay, how are we working to figure this out together, right? How am I working to figure this out together? And the biggest thing I want to give as a takeaway in supporting ourselves through this transition process is, that emergence of compassion and honesty that is so necessary with self-care. When we think about true self-care, supporting ourselves through transition, acknowledging what we need, it has to come from a very honest standpoint, right? I have to be honest about what it is that I can tolerate, what it is that I cannot tolerate. And then going one step further, can I give that to myself from a compassionate stance? Can I give that to myself consistently? I don't just have to give it to myself on Monday. I can give it to myself Tuesday. I can give it to myself Wednesday. How do I work to create a new routine that brings in my strengths, right? So if I love to cook, how am I bringing that in? Or if I love music, one of the things that has made me so happy in this is DJs, right? The music, people playing their music, and, having these lives, and, allowing us to escape, allowing families to come together and dance, or allowing me to get away. Or is there a book that I want to read? How do I bring in pieces that bring peace and happiness to this time? It's easy when we find those forced transition periods. It's easy to become stuck, and it's easy to stay in places that don't serve us. And while we want to acknowledge that they're a part of our process, we also want to be honest and give ourselves compassion for working through them. And knowing too that I can go from acceptance, I'm accepting that this is happening, back to denial. That's a normal part of the change process. Or I can go from maintenance, okay, I've gotten this together. This week we had a great week, back to, what? I'm gonna start next week, or I'm gonna take 2 days off, allowing ourselves the compassion to figure it out as we go along. And so I want to leave that with us today, something to think about as we go into, or as we continue in the next few weeks of the unknown, writing down what I do know, right? Writing down what my strengths are, writing down what identifiers I use as a person. Who am I? How am I seeing myself? Because that's going to help me to create my village. That's going to help me seek out people who are supportive of me in this time and in this process. That's going to help me identify what it is that I need in this moment, understanding that we are complex, we are holistic beings. So I may go from a parent one day to a business owner one day. I need support in this area, to a daughter one day too. And so understanding, we understanding what it takes for us to get through this process, and understanding what it takes to know who we are and where those holes are that we need that extra support in. So that is it for this evening. I am from a parent mode to a business owner mode. I am tired this evening. And so I want to just to hop on here just to give us some tips, kind of help us through the process. So understanding where we are within the stages of change, understanding what we need in our respective lives and our respective moments to kind of get through these processes, and then giving ourselves the compassion or showing ourselves the compassion to support ourselves as we navigate it, because we're all figuring it out together and we're all healing together. As always, thank you all so much for tuning in. I will see you all next week. We are going to be talking about one of the topics that we wanted to use that we got from parents. From the Dr. Tar community, I think we're doing one on parents. When your child is your trigger and your motivation. I don't know how many parents I have in the group tonight, but I have been seeing so many different lovely parent memes about how parents and children are triggering each other through these times. And so we're going to talk about some ways to survive coronavirus 2020 through that lens. And so thank you all so much for tuning in. As always, let's heal together. Have a wonderful evening. Peace.